morning, folks. I want to thank you all for being here today. This is the 17th Judicial Circuit Pro Bono Committee CLE Luncheon. We do this every year, and we've had a couple different formats. As I was just commenting earlier, I have apparently been named chair for life, so I'm familiar with all the formats that we've done for the last several years, and we've had panels and we've had a whole bunch of different presentations. But this time we get a real special presentation because I know James for some time, and I know the work that he's been doing, and he's going to give us a nice presentation today so we can hear about health and wellness and everything that goes with it. Okay, but in addition with the presentation he's doing today, James Heaton. I'll call him by his full name, James W. Heaton. He is wearing a bow tie. Is a supervising attorney for the Mission United Veterans Pro Bono Legal Project at Legal Services of Broward County. The Veterans Pro Bono Project assists low-income disabled military veterans, active duty service members, reservists, and their families facing a variety of civil, administrative, and military-related legal issues by engaging legal resources throughout the community. James has been active in South Florida pro bono community for several years, assisting military and veteran families through Miami VA healthcare system, U.S. Southern Command, Florida International University's legal clinics, and the Broward County Bar Association, along with the United Way of Broward. Currently, James serves on the board of directors for the Broward County Bar Association Young Lawyers Division and the Florida Bar's Military Affairs Committee, the American Bar Association's Commission on Homelessness and Poverty, the United Way of Broward County's Mission United Advisory Council, yes, and is the project leader for the Florida Advocates Veterans Practice Section. Furthermore, James is the co-chair of the United Way Florida Broward Days initiative focusing on legislative advocacy to improve access to fair housing, mental health services, education for service members and military veterans during the last legislative session. So I've known him for a while. I've known the work that he's been doing. He's a top-notch guy and really does excellent work. So let's all give him a round of applause. Let's bring him up here and hear what he has to say.
All right. Well, I don't know if I can get a much better introduction than that. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate it. So thank you, everybody, and good morning for the next minute and a half. Thanks for taking time out of your Friday to come join me and join both Legal Aid and the Broward County Bar Association for putting on this health and wellness event focusing on representing veteran clients. So let's get started. So I'd like to start off always with just a brief roadmap of what we're going to be talking about because why confuse you? It's right here in front of you. So we're going to be going over the interesting topics of representing veteran clients. The first thing will be the goals that we're really trying to achieve through the brief overview. Also, I want to focus on veterans since World War II, so you can really get an idea of the population that we are talking about. And then a brief introduction to military life, starting with entering service, life as an active duty service member, the transition out of service, issues transitioning, wrapping it all up with what does this all mean, and just an overview of common veterans issues and how you can improve your practice by this presentation. All right, so without further ado, here's the brief overview or the goals that we're looking to accomplish. So as you probably know or are aware of, veterans are one of the populations that are most associated with mental health and homelessness issues. So much so that it's created a stigma, a negative stigma against this population. Where when you think veteran, or maybe not you, but when a person thinks veteran, they often associate that with homelessness or a mental health issue instead of the positive aspects of military service. Also, many veterans who are suffering from mental health conditions have these conditions that started while they were in active duty or shortly after. And that's something that's important to remember when we talk about Vietnam-era veterans. Those are people that have been going through the struggle of transitioning back into the civilian life for a long time. Also, transitioning back into civilian life is a difficult aspect of a veteran's life, and often the most difficult aspect, especially as we'll discuss for many of these enlisted folks that entered without a huge family support group and are now exiting back into the civilian world, same. And also, understanding your veteran client, this goes obviously without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. can build help build a stronger attorney-client relationship and make you a better advocate for your client by knowing them and having that bond. So these are the goals that we're looking to accomplish today. Hopefully I do a good enough job that you guys are able to leave without asking any questions, but I'm happy to answer questions later. All right, so veterans since World War II. So we're going to start with World War II vets. When you think of a World War II veteran, you think of a hero, liberator of the free world, defeater of the evil Axis powers, and all the good that comes with that. Returning from service, World War II veterans were greeted with ticker tape parades and hugs and pictures of them kissing in the street and all this great publicity. Also, they returned to an America that has strong economy, strong social bonds. It was a good time to be an American, at least for the next couple years. And it was really just a positive time. There were jobs. There was a purpose in returning. That's the last time that happens. We're going to skip right over Korea because it's the forgotten war. And we'll jump right into the Vietnam era. And as many of you understand or maybe have experienced, that coming back from Vietnam, these people, these veterans, were not seen in the same positive light. There was no ticker tape parade. In fact, the opposite happened. They were spit on. They were vilified. The war was highly unpopular. And it was just not a good time for returning. The economy was fragmented. There were civil rights issues going on. It was just not a good social time for America and for these men and women returning from Vietnam. And that's going to be important to remember for later. And then we fast forward to post 9/11. Now there's a period of peacetime in between, but we'll talk about this. These conflict veterans returning, post 9/11 vets coming back. And they're kind of seen as this stigma group, as returning broken or having some type of mental health problem, instead of for any of the positive reasons. A lot of that negative stigma is put on these post 9/11 veterans returning. A lot of them had extended or multiple enlistment deployments overseas, to many times downrange in a dangerous combat zone. And they're returning home without a parade. That's still an ongoing conflict, so they're returning home gradually to their families, kind of unannounced at this point. And America, well, look around us. We're politically divided. We're more socially divided than we've ever been. It's a tough place to come back to, especially when you have that changed or new perspective on the world. So that's really, I want you to just understand some of the different generations of the veterans that you may encounter. And our clients also at the Veterans Project. So here's where the fun begins. We're going to have some videos for you today to break up the monotony of my voice. And so we're going to start here with this fun little video. So whoever has not been through enlisted boot camp before is about to. This is about 2 weeks. We're going to do week 2 and week 3 of a Marine Corps boot camp. So get ready.
Seven, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. 5 minutes to shave. Brush your teeth with a hand cloth. 5 minutes. Make those racks right now. Tight racks. Pull the top rack tight. Ready. Move. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Yes, sir.
We look right here, you got your M16A2 service rifle, you understand that? Yes, sir. This is a bayonet trainer, you understand that? Yes, sir. What you're gonna have is an actual live bayonet, we understand that? Yes, sir. These techniques that you're gonna learn are to kill your opponent. Yes, sir. It's gonna look like this. I'm stepping forward, thrusting my weapon out, you understand that? Yes, sir. Then retracting my rear foot in, bringing the weapon back in, you understand that? Yes, sir. Through my opponent, you understand that? Yes, sir. When you get out there on my bayonet assault course, they're gonna try to destroy everything on that assault course. You get up, give me everything you got. Yes, get on your feet right now.
Where I say go, you say I, sir. Go!
You should be happy because you just destroyed my course. You understand that, right? You should be pretty content with yourself. You understand that?
All right, that's a crash course of 2 weeks of a Marine Corps boot camp. Who's ready to join the Marines here? Sorry, Penter, if that caused any... All right, getting back to things. So as you saw there, this is essentially just a short video I wanted to show you about some of the aspects of entering boot camp as a new recruit. And these are brand new things that many civilians just don't understand. And really the purpose of that boot camp, and Marine Corps is one of the most intense there, but it really teaches that structure, discipline, trust, and to respect and not question the chain of command. Boot camp further provides the physical strength and technical skills that you're going to need to be a service member. And also prepares the civilian, the weak, soft civilian, for a life as a service member. And just by reiterating and going through those skills and just ensuring that they're upholding the standards of the military day in and day out for the time that they're in and for the foreseeable future. So this used to be called indoctrination, and I think it still is in some of the branches for officer training, or rewiring, because that's really what it is when you think about it. They're taking you as taking someone as a civilian and turning them into a military service member or a soldier, if you will. Now, I also want to talk about briefly, because it's important to understand why some people enter the military. Now, there's a variety of reasons. This is a short list, but it will help clarify some of the stuff moving on later in the PowerPoint. Family heritage. My father served in the military, so I'm going to serve in the military. Answering the call. I'm graduating high school, and I just want to serve my country somehow. Or maybe school was not an option for you. You didn't do well in high school, and you had no ambition going to college, or you couldn't go into college because of financial reasons, so you joined the military. Or maybe it's something even worse. You had poor behavior, and your family forced you to go into the military, to say, or you were drafted into the military. Now, there's obviously other reasons why you would go in, but these are some of the common ones, and they're really going to impact later on the type of individual that comes out of the military on the other side. So, life of a service member. All flowery and fun. So as an enlisted service member, and then again, I just want to kind of point out that this presentation is focusing mostly on enlisted service members. Now, officers are going to probably have a much different experience for the most part as far as some of the daily life and responsibilities go than an enlisted individual. However, not to be put down in any way. I want to focus mostly on the life of an enlisted individual here. So whether living on or off base, you probably have your housing paid for or at least subsidized in some sort. So you got that covered. Your daily activities are planned out. You know where to go, what to do, when you're doing it, how to do it, who to go to. All of this is done for you for the most part. You have who to go to or where to go to for all of your basic needs, or if you have any concerns. Also, you have an identity that's meaningful because you worked hard for that identity. I worked hard to be a sergeant. I worked hard to be staff sergeant or my E7. And you're part of a tribe or a community. Now, you're going to hear that term tribe used a few times through this presentation, and it's an important theme to kind of let sink in that you're part of something. You're part of a tribe, something greater than yourself that has a purpose. Now, deployment may or may not be part of your life. Only about 10% of military personnel are deployed to combat zones, but it's 10% still a whole lot of people. So, moving forward, talking about deployment. Now, deployment can lead to some additional stressors in the household while you're away. Now, for both the service member and their families. So, yes, sir.
Can I just give an example? I was in the Marines on active duty. I was living in the barracks, and so it's paid for, and you've got the chow hall where you can go and eat. But we had a sergeant, and he had 3 kids,
Mm-hmm.
so he got that stipend to live off post. They were on food stamps, because that's how much
Yeah.
between the pay, and they were on food stamps. We were working 12-hour shifts for 6 months, 7 days a week. And when he found out that he could go to the chow hall, and he had to pay, but it was like $3 and get a meal. The fact that he could drink all the milk he wanted, he couldn't believe it.
Oh,
because he was
jeez.
living with his family on food stamps.
Mhm.
His kids had to get the milk. So
Yeah, no, thank you, Ed. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's.
that's the reality of it.
Yep. So, moving forward to deployment, as I mentioned, it can lead to additional stressors for both the service member and their family. So, the family unit being disrupted, being apart, especially during important times in a family member's life, a birth, a death, a birthday, whatever it might be. Also, the fear of losing a loved one. the danger of being in a combat zone, the potential of developing some long-lasting mental health conditions, such as PTSD, and also the daily stressors of being downrange. With that, that's a good segment to our next video. So who here has a long drive in the morning to get to and from work? Lindsay definitely has a long drive and down I-95 probably to get down to Miami. So here is what driving in downtown Baghdad was like in a Humvee.
Yeah, oncoming maybe? Yeah, there you go, stay to the left. This guy just picking his nose, not a fucking care in the world.
Look at that. Show a video of Baghdad. That was Miami traffic. So who here thought something was going to happen in that video? Well, it looks like things did happen in that video. That was a 2.5-minute video, but that felt like an hour of just that stress of just watching all of that happen. Now imagine doing that every day, not knowing if something's going to happen, or not ever really, knowing if you're going to make it through the city or not. So I've watched that video like 10 or 15 times, and I'm still stressed watching it. But yeah, that's, like I said, not everyone's going to be deployed, but that's one aspect. And that was a pretty tame thing going on there. No one got hurt or injured there. So next I want to spend a decent amount of time talking about transitioning out of the military. So as many of you may know, the Department of Defense offers a Transition Assistance Program, or TAP. Now, TAP helps the enlisted service member figure out what they can do with some VA benefits, develop a plan for education, for housing, for employment, but, it provides you with a duffel bag of some resources. But, notice how there's no cool video showing military indoctrination back into civilian life like I showed you going into the military. It's because the TAP program is pretty inefficient when it comes to that stuff. Many service members find the TAP program to be unhelpful, not memorable. They admit to being checked out during this whole process, and they feel like it was just a process they had to go through, and they just wanted to get out and be home. And then you're left outside. You're like, okay, thanks, have a good day, thank you for your service, and you're out of the program. Now, you also go through a medical examination, which may be as equally as laughable, not wanting to admit to anything, and just wanting to get out and be done with it. So, talking about that, once out of the service, you, as a veteran, you mostly don't have access to a military base. Now, obviously, there's some exceptions there if you're retired or if you're 100% service connected, but for the most part, you have no way of getting back to that support group that you had. And even if you do have access, you don't have access to the full range of services that you had as a service member. So you kind of go from one day to the next of that loss of identity, from being Sergeant First Class Jones in charge of 2,000 service members. That was yesterday, but today now you're just Michael Jones and you're just nobody. You're one of us, where nobody cares about you in the civilian world. So you also have that uncertainty of where to go or what to do for help. You think, oh wait, they said something in TAFs about the VA, but I don't need to go to the VA. That's for combat veterans who lost a leg, and I'm fine. And also not wanting to ask for help due to pride, being told that you don't need help for the past 4, 6, 8, 12, however long you've been in, all that pride that's been instilled in you since boot camp. Now, there tends to be also a disconnect in some personalities, values, and motives between veterans and civilians, where veterans may have a distrust towards civilians because you're leaving the service with a different perspective on the world. And you see what's going on, especially coming back in the news and social media, and you're like, oh, how do I get along with these people? So now, this is a good time to stop for a second and talk about what a veteran is or who a veteran is. And I like having this conversation because it's fairly interesting, or at least it is to me. Maybe I'm just a nerd about this stuff. But so just to be clear, service member refers to an active duty service, usually 4-year enlistment terms. It's someone who's under the jurisdiction of the Department of Defense, military branch, or the UCMJ. And the enlistment term may end for a variety of reasons. There could be various reasons, such as the expiration of the term of service. Maybe there's an administrative discharge, which we'll talk more about in a moment. A court-martial. Maybe you got out because of a hardship. There's someone at home who is ill that you need to take care of. Or you retired, or you were disabled. And so you're separated due to disability or retired because of your disability. Now, upon leaving service, a service member is given a character of service, one of these 6 lovely titles here. So I don't know if you can read them in the back, but I'll go over them. And the 6 are, in order, honorable, general under honorable conditions, other than honorable, also known as OTH or bad paper discharge, bad conduct, dishonorable, and uncharacterized. Now, I color-coded this for you for a handy guide. As you'll hear in a second. Green means good, yellow means not good, red means bad. Uncharacterized means they just didn't know enough about you. Probably had less than 6 months of service, and they didn't know, hey, did you deserve an honorable, or was it more other than honorable? I don't know. Uncharacterized, just get out of here. So this is a key part of who the veteran is going to become and what they might be eligible for. So one of the big issues, too, is the definition of veteran. The term veteran has multiple definitions. So in the federal context by the VA, it's someone who served in the active duty and was discharged under conditions other than dishonorable. Now, that ultimately is filtered through the VA process, through an administrative process, to determine what honorable service means, and the VA sees it as honorable or dishonorable. Now, going back here for a second, green means good. You probably have honorable service under the VA if you were discharged under honorable or general conditions. Other than honorable, they have to do a whole evaluation of your service to determine whether it falls on the honorable side or dishonorable side. The majority of the time, it's going to fall on the dishonorable side. If you're red, it's going to be on the dishonorable side. Now, the issue with this is, as you see, some benefits require the veteran to have served for specific periods of time, or during a specific period of time. It may require the veteran to have an honorable discharge specifically. On their discharge document, which we'll talk about in a second. Or there may be multiple enlistment terms. There may be, maybe you served for 8 years, and in that last year you did something really bad and you got kicked out with an other than honorable discharge, but for the first 4 years, you were good, and you served honorably. So there's a lot of confusion there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And another thing to point out, the state definitions vary as well. Not just how they differ from the federal definition, but also by state. So you can be living somewhere in North Florida and cross the border, and you weren't a veteran in Florida, but then in Georgia, now you're a veteran. So it can be very confusing state by state. In the state of Florida, I actually left out a word here, which I need to add because it's an important one. So Florida has a broad definition. These aren't the exact from the Constitution, but you have to have served active duty and were discharged under honorable conditions only. And then they add notwithstanding anything by the Department of Veterans Affairs, meaning that administrative decision that they do. So you had to have had an honorable discharge. And Florida over the past few years has expanded that to include both green areas. Thank you, to have a general discharge. But even if you had an other than honorable discharge, and the VA said, oh no, but it's honorable for VA purposes, you're still not a veteran under the state of Florida Constitution. It's a lot of fun, right? Now, most of the benefits that veterans try to receive are federal benefits. However, there is some impact for the state definition. One of the big ones is Veterans Treatment Court, which we'll talk about briefly later as well. All right, so this is a document that everyone needs to know about. It's the Department of Defense Form 214, or the DD-214, as you probably heard it called before. And that document contains a whole lot of information about a veteran. Now, it includes everything from the name and date of birth and social security number to also the MOS, which is the military occupation specialty, which is essentially the veteran's job, to also the rank at separation, enlistment terms, the enlistment and separation dates, awards, decorations, foreign service, other comments, and also has their character of service, which we had talked about back here, so one of these fine delineations. Also their narrative reason for separation, which is the reason why they were separated. So it might say honorable discharge, and then under narrative reason, completed enlistment term. Or it might say other than honorable discharge. For separation reason, it might say misconduct. Whatever it might, it's going to vary a bit on the service member. Also the separation authority, which is the UCMJ provisions that they were separated under, and a reenlistment code, which is essentially their ticket to get back in if they wish to reenlist. Now, the DD-214 is mostly known as the document used for proof of military service. It's widely accepted everywhere for their proof of military service. These days, the state of Florida has gotten a little innovative, and on driver's licenses, you can get a nice blue V on there. And a lot of places are taking that now in place of a DD-214, but it's still the industry standard, if you will, for proof of military service. Now, let's go back to transitioning out of the military, because the transition process becomes even more difficult if your enlistment term ended due to administrative discharge. Now, the administrative discharges are, getting off the PowerPoint topic a little bit. It's a discretionary process that the command goes through to separate someone from service. So say there's some misconduct. Say you tested positive for marijuana first time, and they want to get you out. You may get kicked out through an administrative discharge, which is not the court-martial process. It's just a process done through the chain of command, where it's the paperwork's filed upwards, and ultimately it's decided through a discharge board if you should receive this type of discharge when getting kicked out through the administrative process. And it can be anywhere from one of those first three discharges, so honorable, general, or other than honorable. Like I said, there's a lot of discretion there. So you'll hear stories sometimes of two service members who served together, who got in trouble for the same misconduct, and one guy got out with an other than honorable discharge, and the other guy's maybe still in service or got out with an honorable or a general discharge. Those are big differences there, and that's the problem with these administrative discharges. So this whole transition process that I've been talking about becomes a lot more difficult when you got kicked out because of misconduct. That administrative discharge, it sounds super unfair, right? And I hope you think it sounds unfair, because it could be very unfair. Also, the UCMJ can be very unfair too. Ed will give that whole presentation at another point, but on another date. But yeah, it can definitely be a super unfair beast there. Now, as I mentioned, a veteran receiving an administrative discharge for some minor misconduct might not have access to those same resources as a veteran out processing at the end of their enlistment term. You might not have access to that TAP program or some of these outbound services. And once you get out, you may not think that you're eligible for any services. So say you got kicked out, say you served 8 years, as I gave that example earlier, 8 years, And then the last year, you got in trouble for, I'm going to use that drug reference for smoking marijuana, and you got an other than honorable discharge, and they said, have a good day, and you left. You got out of service. Maybe you went through a brief court-martial process, but you took the discharge instead. Who knows? So you get out. Now you have this DD-214 that shows other than honorable at the bottom, and you go to the VA. You're like, I'm going to go to the VA. I don't know what to do. And you go, I need some help. And they look at it and go, yeah, sorry, you're not eligible. I go, what are you talking about? Like, nope, sorry, sir. Next. And then what do? You think you're going to go back to the VA and try again? Probably not. And we see this as a big problem. That guy is actually eligible for benefits. Yes.
It almost seems like antithetical. Like, don't they need the most help in a way?
Yes. So that's one of the big things that we advocate for as well, but that's a big issue. And we had a veteran who had served. He got out in 1982, went to the VA in 1983, said, sorry, sir, you're not eligible for any benefits. Have a good one. And he's like, okay. So he left, never went back to the VA. Then he comes to us in 2016, and he says, James, I want to get a VA home loan, but I don't know if I'm eligible. I go, why not? He goes, because the VA told me in 83 that I wasn't a veteran. I go, well, let me see your DD-214. I look at it, I go, well, you were in for 7 years, right? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, clearly says on your DD-214 right here, honorable service, completed first term of service honorably between these years. Yeah, I did. Okay. I highlighted that for him. I said, go back to the VA today and show him this and tell him to enroll you. And guess what? He got enrolled into healthcare. The same place that he got turned away from, he got enrolled into. And I wish I could say that doesn't happen anymore, but it does, and we have to constantly battle it, especially when it's more complicated than that. So it's a problem. Now, that's enough VA bashing for now. So let's talk about some issues with reintegrating back into the civilian world. So there's some veterans that we talk to, and I talk to a lot of veterans, that have said that they would still rather be downrange than here in the civilian world. And when you hear that, you're like, why? And the reason being, well, you had your support system there. You had your battle buddy. You knew someone that you can turn to. You can look to your right, and that was your guy or your girl. That was your person. Or you look behind you, and you had somebody there watching your back. Like you had everything you needed right there, and you felt safe, and you had a purpose, and life was going all right. And now, a lot of the newer studies are showing that there's the loss of tribe mentality has both an independent effect on veterans transitioning, and it also has the effect on essentially comorbidity with PTSD or depression or anxiety, that it's making these conditions worse or chronic. Now, for these reasons, some veterans either choose or have maybe not by choice end up homeless and maybe end up in a tribe of their own in a community, such as what we had here at the encampment in front of the library in Pompano and down in Hollywood, where I'd rather be here with these people that know me and are helping me than be put up into your place and be prodded and asked all these questions from people that just don't understand. But the world that you're returning to as well may have that effect. You're not coming back to a happy world that's accepting you. Now, I can talk about this all day, but let's have our good friend Sebastian Younger talk about it very briefly.
So let's go back to the U.S. military. 10% are in combat. Around 50% have filed for PTSD compensation. So about 40% of veterans really were not traumatized overseas, but have come home to discover that they are dangerously alienated and depressed. So what is happening with them? What's going on with those people? The phantom 40% that are troubled, but they don't understand why. Maybe it's this. Maybe they had an experience of sort of tribal closeness in their unit when they were overseas. They were eating together, sleeping together, doing tasks and missions together. They were trusting each other with their lives. And then they come home, and they have to give all of that up, and they're coming back to a society, a modern society, which is hard on people who weren't even in the military. It's just hard on everybody. And we keep focusing on trauma, PTSD. But for a lot of these people, maybe it's not trauma. I mean, certainly soldiers are traumatized, and the ones who are have to be treated for that. But a lot of them, maybe what's bothering them is actually a kind of alienation. I mean, maybe we just have the wrong word for some of it. And just changing our language, our understanding would help a little bit. Post-deployment alienation disorder. Maybe even just calling it that for some of these people would allow them to stop trying to imagine a trauma that didn't really happen in order to explain a feeling that really is happening. And in fact, it's an extremely dangerous feeling. That alienation and depression can lead to suicide. These people are in danger. It's very important to understand why. The Israeli military has a PTSD rate of around 1%. The theory is that everyone in Israel is supposed to serve in the military. When soldiers come back from the front line, they're not going from a military environment to a civilian environment. They're coming back to a community where everyone understands about the military. Everyone's been in it or is going to be in it. Everyone understands the situation they're all in. It's as if they're all in one big tribe. We know that if you take a lab rat and traumatize it and put it in a cage by itself, you can maintain its trauma symptoms almost indefinitely. And if you take that same lab rat and put it in a cage with other rats, after a couple of weeks, it's pretty much okay. After 9/11, the murder rate in New York City went down by 40%. The suicide rate went down. The violent crime rate in New York went down after 9/11. Even combat veterans of previous wars who suffered from PTSD said that their symptoms went down after 9/11 happened. The reason is that if you traumatize an entire society, we don't fall apart and turn on one another. We come together, we unify. Basically, we tribalize. And that process of unifying feels so good and is so good for us that it even helps people who are struggling with mental health issues. During the Blitz in London, admissions to psychiatric wards went down during the bombings. For a while, that was the kind of country that American soldiers came back to. A unified country. We were sticking together. We were trying to understand the threat against us. We were trying to help us, trying to help ourselves and the world. But that's changed.
All right, so that's Sebastian Younger. He's got a great book called, if you can guess the title, you get $1. It's called Tribe. I think Penter has my copy of it right now. I do. It's a very quick read, but Penter's still learning how to read. He was a Marine, so it's a great book to check out. A lot of these principles are Sebastian talks about, and they're very relevant to this topic. All right, so moving on. Hope that sinks in with you guys a little bit. So what does this all mean? Let's do a quick little debriefing of this. So not all veterans come from the same place, as I've mentioned, different walks of life. Not all veterans have lived the same experiences. Not all veterans are fighting the same internal battles. Not all veterans have access to all the resources that the state and the VA generally provide. And maybe it's us as a society that's ruined and not the veteran. So I hope that this kind of helps you change that perspective and defeat that stigma that veterans are broken. That that's really what I'm hoping to convey here. That's not the case. Now, let's talk about some common issues faced by veterans here as we get into the home stretch of my presentation. I'm just kidding. You guys still have like another 2 hours here. So we're going to briefly talk about applying for VA benefits, PTSD, TBI, MST, and the discharge upgrade process. And I say briefly, if you know about any of this stuff, it's gonna we'll get through it. Don't worry. So VA benefits. I like to talk about VA benefits as a couple different categories. First, we talk about service-connected disability, and that is the VA looks at 3 separate things. There's 3 requirements to receive service-connected disability in general. The first is you need an in-service, you need a diagnosis of a current disability. So you need to be currently diagnosed with something. Makes sense? You need an in-service event or stressor. That's number 2. And the third is you need medical nexus, showing causation between those first 2 things. So you have to show that your current disability is somehow related to your in-service event or stressor. Now, there's a bunch of presumptions that afford some easier access to benefits, but that is for the most part service-connected disability. Now, there's lengthy appeals processes if you're denied service-connected disability the first time. The VA's recently launched their Appeals Modernization Act, and we'll see how that works. It launched middle of February this year after about 2 years or so of their pilot project. So we'll see. We'll see if that actually makes things better. Also, when I say lengthy, there's a current Supreme Court case right now that there was just the Office of General Counsel for the VA that was asked by the judge or the justice, what is unreasonable? And I go, well, blah, 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 blah. So the judge was fed up with it. He goes, all right, well, tell me, counselor, is 25 years for a case to be resolved unreasonable? And what does the counselor say? It'd likely be unreasonable. And the judge goes, you keep using that, weaseling around that word, likely. All right, let's 50 years. Same response. It'd likely be unreasonable. Okay, he's like, I'm done here. Listen, counselor, I'm going to ask you this question, and I'm going to ask you to think about it. And think about this answer before you say it, and think about the implications here. Would 100 years be unreasonable? Counselor goes back to his podium, confers with his boss, the chief general counsel for the VA, comes back, and he goes, we stand on our answer. So that's fun. So is 100 years unreasonable? I don't know. I'm not old enough to have had a claim that it went on 100 years. We joke, Lori Yadoff is an attorney with Coast to Coast Legal Aid who's been doing this work for some years, and we joke she says that she's never taken a case from the beginning up through a remand for the Board of Veterans' Appeals. And I said, why not? She said, I'm not old enough. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that the process can be lengthy. And so if granted, the VA rates the disability. So if you win the case, the VA will then rate your disability from a scale from 0 to 100% in 10% increments, or however the regulation sees fit, based on the severity of your symptoms for the most part. And that's a sliding scale. It can go up and down as your symptoms improve or get better. And also there's we're not having a whole lecture on VA benefits today, but just know that there are other ways to get some special monthly compensation or additional benefits through the VA. So if you're totally and permanently disabled or unable to work, or you need special physical accommodations or someone to come take care of you, there may be additional benefits paid. Now, non-service connected pension is just what it sounds like, kind of. Not really, though. It's not a pension. It's like SSI. So if you know about SSI, it's a supplemental income that is on a scale a little bit higher than SSI. It pays up to about $1,200 a month in general, with additional money being paid for additional dependents, or if you need aid in attendance, or your homebound, which is someone coming in to take care of you. But it's offset by your other assets that you have or income that you have coming in, and they just recently changed the law in October to look a lot more like Medicaid, so it's become more difficult as well to plan for this stuff. Now, education benefits such as the GI Bill, as I mentioned, the GI Bill is one of those benefits that you have to have on your DD-214 an honorable discharge, or more specifically, you have to have served honorably at some point to get the GI Bill. You can't have an other than honorable discharge on your first enlistment term and get the GI Bill. It has to be an honorable discharge. So it's one of those often sought after benefits. And healthcare as well. Now, since the 1980s, the VA's kind of changed how they accept healthcare, and it's kind of changed with how the enlistment terms have changed as well. You have to have at least 24 consecutive months of honorable, and that's on the federal definition, honorable service to be eligible for VA healthcare, or you have to fit one of the exceptions, which for the most part, having a service-connected disability would be an exception. So for example, we have a veteran who has an other than honorable discharge, served 5 years in the Army, one enlistment term, he was held over for his legal battles, 2 combat tours in Afghanistan, Purple Heart recipient, PTSD diagnosis. He received an other than honorable discharge due to his misconduct that was clearly symptomatic of PTSD. This was a huge fight getting him enrolled into VA healthcare, which he was definitely eligible for. He fit all the criteria. We had a positive PTSD diagnosis within a year of separation, combat, and we had him tentatively enrolled in VA, which then they canceled all his appointments once they saw the OTH and whatever. So we fought for about a year and a half, and now he's getting healthcare benefits from the VA like he's supposed to. He's getting treated for his PTSD, and that's one of the problems. Like was mentioned, aren't these the people that need it the most? Yes. Yes, they are. All right, let's talk about some more lighthearted things like post-traumatic stress disorder. So in the year 2013, the American Psychiatric Association revised the DSM to their version DSM-5 to include a new category of trauma and stressor-related disorder. Previously, I believe PTSD was filed somewhere under anxiety. But now they have stressor and trauma-related disorders to include post-traumatic stress disorder. And the one that we're talking about here is for adults. And a diagnosis for PTSD must include all of these things. So there has to be a stressor, obviously, something that happened. There has to be intrusion symptoms, which could be insomnia, it could be re-experiencing, it could be whatever whatever the intrusion symptom might be, avoidance, and multiple negative alterations in cognitions and mood, which could be physical violence, it could be a change in behavior. Also, a duration of greater than 1 month, and significant functional impairment, and that the symptoms are not due to medication or some other disability. So it's a pretty specific diagnosis for PTSD, which can make it very difficult for some service members to obtain these benefits if they're not getting a diagnosis. Now, a positive diagnosis of PTSD, and I want to be clear on this, does not mean that this person is dangerous or a threatening individual. That's part of the huge stigma. We've heard some people in authority in Broward County say before that, oh, we had a veteran that had PTSD and he was just completely, unable to do anything. He would hide in the closet during 4th of July and all that. And that's not helping the rhetoric at all. It's only furthering the stigma and the divide. So just know that just like any other mental health condition, a positive diagnosis doesn't always mean that this person is dangerous or different, or you may not even ever know that this person has PTSD unless they tell you. So now the VA itself offers group and individual therapy and medication for people suffering from PTSD. Also, over the past 5 years, groups such as the Wounded Warrior Project have really found innovative ways to help treat PTSD through the hyperbolic chambers and cryogenic therapy, and this stuff has been really, really interesting, and it's made great impacts outside of medication. Now, the combat veterans tend to experience PTSD on a more frequent tick, and Mr. Younger explains about it in his book Tribe, that it may be due to that connection with military service, where it's tough to separate the negative stressor, that negative trauma, from the positive aspects of your military service. So because of that, it may be more difficult to treat and may be more difficult for the person to overcome. So think of someone who was in a one-off trauma, whatever, you got in a car crash by yourself, I don't know, something bad happened, and you got treated, you had some PTSD symptoms, you got treated, it went away because it was attached to one bad incident. But when it's attached to an underlying, generally good feeling of military service, it's much more difficult to treat. Now I have one more video that I want to show, and then I'm done with the videos, I promise. But this one's good. It's the story, a brief story of Mr. Younger's. This is from his other TED Talk. Very brief, his own experience.
I worked as a war reporter for 15 years before I realized that I really had a problem. There was something really wrong with me. This is about a year before 9/11, and America wasn't at war yet. We weren't talking about PTSD. We were not yet talking about the effect of trauma and war on the human psyche. I'd been in Afghanistan for a couple of months with the Northern Alliance as they were fighting the Taliban. And at that point, the Taliban had an air force, they had fighter planes, they had tanks, they had artillery, and we really got hammered pretty badly a couple of times, and we saw some very ugly things. But I didn't really think it affected me. I didn't think much about it. I came home to New York, where I live, and then one day I went down into the subway, and for the first time in my life, I knew real fear. I had a massive panic attack. I was way more scared than I'd ever been in Afghanistan. Everything I was looking at seemed like it was going to kill me, but I couldn't explain why. The trains were going too fast, there were too many people, the lights were too bright, everything was too loud, everything was moving too quickly, and I backed up against a support column and just waited for it. And when I couldn't take it any longer, I ran out of the subway station and walked wherever I was going. Later, I found out that what I had was short-term PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. We evolved as animals, as primates, to survive periods of danger, and if your life has been in danger, you want to react to unfamiliar noises. You want to sleep lightly, wake up easily. You want to have nightmares and flashbacks of the thing that could kill you. You want to be angry because it makes you predisposed to fight, or depressed because it keeps you out of circulation a little bit, keeps you safe. It's not very pleasant, but it's better than getting eaten. Most people recover from that pretty quickly. It takes a few weeks, a few months. I kept having panic attacks, but they eventually went away. I had no idea it was connected to the war that I'd seen. I just thought I was going crazy, and then I thought, well, now I'm not going crazy anymore. About 20% of people.
That's pretty interesting stuff there about the human reaction and how post-traumatic stress disorder is kind of just a natural human reaction to the response from a traumatic experience. All right, so moving on, we'll talk about some less common or maybe less known things. Traumatic brain injury. It's essentially an injury from an external impact, whether it's a blast or a fall, that could have lasting symptoms anywhere from mild to more severe. I'm not going to get too much into it, but just know that it's something that can be experienced from a blast, an IED blast, getting shot at, or maybe shot in a helmet, or whatever it might be. Also, we're going to talk about, well, right now, military sexual trauma. So MST, as it's called, is sexual assault or personal assault or sexual harassment that's experienced while in the military. I just want to go through some of the statistics, and, well, one, to be clear, anyone can experience military sexual trauma regardless of gender. The VA data shows that about 1 in 5 women and 1 in 100 men experience at least one instance of military sexual trauma during their time in the military, and historically sexual assault has been underreported. However, in 2017, there was about a 10% uptick in reports of sexual assault in the military. Now, that sounds like things were getting worse. However, the data shows that there were fewer instances, but it's being more reported these days as, people in the chain of command start learning more and become educated that this is an actual thing. So as you see, data shows that 1 in 3 military members chose to report their sexual assault, which was up from about 1 in 14 in 2006, and also about 1,446, so that was about 40% of the reported cases had enough evidence to result in a court-martial, or take action. About half them resulted in a court-martial, which, fortunately, there's some justice there. Now, with the military discharge upgrade, as I mentioned, if you have one of these bad paper discharges, there's ways to fix that. Since about 2014, the Hagel memo came out, which was Department of Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. He said, hey, guys, you guys really need to focus on these service members that were separated with post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, or victims of military sexual trauma that received these bad paper discharges. We need to go through and review those to make sure that the misconduct that they were separated for was not just underlying symptoms of one of these conditions. So that has been a way for us as practitioners to help these service members that maybe have a bad paper discharge get that fixed to be more accurately reflective of their situation. And that will also open them up to benefits. That will change to their DD-214 to show something more favorable. It can increase the ability for employment, for education benefits. It's a huge impact for economic factors. All right, So just briefly some practice tips, and we're going to wrap it up here. I just want you to be better able to understand your veteran client. Ask a couple questions. What'd you do in the service? What was your MOS? If you ask what's your MOS, you're going to get like as a 11 Bravo or whatever, whatever you might get. You're going to say, I don't know what that is, and they'll tell you. Also be mindful, don't ask like, did you have to kill anybody in the service or any of your friends died? Don't ask questions like that. No matter how interested you might be, just avoid those. This was a big one, if you ever do like a clinic where veterans are walking in and you get a couple walk in, don't stand up and shake the gentleman's hand, say thank you for your service, just to find out that his wife was actually the service member. Yeah, that's a good way to lose trust right away. So just be able to provide legal links to resources. Please use us as a resource. Use the Broward County Bar Association as a resource. Mission United is here in Broward County and throughout 7 other counties in the United States as of today in 2018, and it's expanding. So there's a lot of good resources in the state of Florida. Use your local Department of Veterans Affairs, the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. Use Legal Aid as a legal resource if you have questions. Always a good member of the community, no matter where you are in the state, there's a Legal Aid. Also, for veterans in the criminal justice system, talk to them about the Veterans Treatment Court. Talk to if they have a public defender or a private criminal attorney. Ask them about, hey, is this person eligible for the Veterans Treatment Court? Have you tried to get them eligible for Veterans Treatment Court? Also, be able to provide links to non-legal resources, 211. 211, both for your veteran clients and your non-veteran clients that are going through a time of crisis. There's a 211 in every community here in Florida. You can dial it from your phone right now and be linked up with somebody that can put you in touch with the services that you need. The Department of Veterans Affairs, Mission United, as I mentioned before, 211 will get you to Mission United if you're a vet. The Vet Center, they specialize in healthcare for combat veterans, and the Veterans Crisis Line, it's the suicide prevention line. They also have text capabilities, and they're developing an app as well. So it's super user-friendly for some of the younger veterans or the more tech-savvy veterans. However, the app might not be relevant for your Vietnam veteran or Korean War veteran who doesn't have access to that technology. However, don't expect your veteran clients to ask for help. It's probably not going to happen until the time of crisis is so high that they just don't know what to do. But the more you build trust with your veteran clients, the more likely they are to open up to you. But just don't keep those expectations too high. All right, and if you have any questions, this is how to reach me. That's my phone number. I was going to put Penter's cell phone number on there, but decided against it. So that's my cell phone number and email address. Also, get involved. Get involved with Mission United in your area. Get involved with Legal Aid. Volunteer to take a case. Help out. I know you're probably going to hear more about that in a second anyway. But thank you very much. That's been my presentation.
One more time, let's give James a round of applause. And it goes without saying that we have the privilege of working in a legal system that I think we are all very proud of, that provides access to many people, and that privilege is brought to us by the fact that people are willing to take the time and serve to defend the ideals and the Constitution of this country, so that we can have a safe ability to have freedom, access to courts, access to freedom of speech, and all the fun things that go with it. So to know that they're out there and they need help, if you come across a veteran, I've had the privilege of being able to go into Veterans Treatment Court with Judge Merrigan and seen the great work that he does there. I've seen the work James does and through Legal Aid, but please reach out and do all that you can to help, because it is important to make sure they know that we're here for them. All right. So I'm going to bring up Chantel. Chantel Winter. She's going to give you a little recruitment speech. So.
Thank you, Judge. Yes, so as Judge Izquierdo was just saying, it's the responsibility of all attorneys to ensure equal access to justice. We're in the unique position to be able to provide that to the clients in our community. So I'll speak a little bit about Broward Lawyers Care. So James Heaton obviously is the supervisor for Mission United, which is the Veterans Pro Bono project at Legal Aid. So he offers a lot of pro bono opportunities to help veterans with their civil legal issues. Broward Lawyers Care is just a general pro bono program. So we work with civilians. So you can do things like you can help a survivor of domestic violence to help get a divorce from her abuser. You can help a family to fight foreclosure or eviction. You can help a disabled person who has mounting medical debt to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and, get a fresh start. So there's a lot of different ways you can get involved. One particular project that we have going this year is called No Place Like Home. The goal of the project is to help people clear title to their homes. So if they're living in a home that's titled in the name of a relative who passed away and they need to get the home title in their name, we're recruiting pro bono attorneys to help them either file a probate case and get the home in their name or file a quiet title suit. So that's one way you can get involved right now. We also have every Tuesday we have our advice and counsel hotline. It's every Tuesday from 2 to 5. You don't need any previous experience. You just sign up. We give you the training when you show up at 2, and we're there if you have any questions or need any guidance. If you do take a case, we also offer mentor attorneys. We offer coverage for litigation expenses. So we're there to support you, the entire way through. So thank you all again for coming out today and supporting Pro Bono.
And I know I am talking to the people that do put in the time, but I just always ask, take this back to members of your organizations, take this back to people that you know. Prior to joining the judiciary, one of the most impactful things I ever felt that I had the ability to do as a lawyer was give my time to pro bono. I've had the opportunity to be on the hotline. We did some great things with the Broward Legal Immigration Program, I'm sure Tony remembers, and many other things. And I can tell you that it was usually really the highlight of doing legal work, the feeling that you have when you help somebody in that way. So thank you very much. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you all soon.